The thing nobody tells you about being the dependable one is that dependable eventually starts to mean available. Available for the calls at midnight. Available for the loans that never become repayments. Available to smile through dinners where your name comes up only when someone needs something. I'm 31 years old. I'm a licensed structural engineer at a firm I built from scratch with my college roommate, and I hold a captain's commission in the Texas Army National Guard. I own a 4-bedroom house on 2 acres outside of Austin that I bought at 28 with money I saved while eating rice and beans for 2 years straight. My name is on the deed. My signature is on the mortgage I paid off early. There is not a single dollar of family money in any of it. None of that has ever impressed my family. What impresses my family is my younger brother's smile. My brother is 24. He has never held a job longer than 5 months. He is charming the way a summer storm is charming, beautiful, until it destroys something. My parents have been rebuilding after him since he was 16. I stopped counting how many times I watched my mother hand him cash from her purse while she told me, with a completely straight face, that she didn't have money to visit me in Austin. I stopped counting, but I never stopped remembering. The dynamic was established early. I was the child who did not require investment because I was already producing returns. My brother was the child who required everything because he was still becoming. I was 22 and working 2 jobs when my father sat me down and explained, with genuine tenderness, that my brother needed help with rent. I wrote the check. I told myself it was love. I think now it was training. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from working hard, but from being the only person in a room who sees the pattern. I saw it at every holiday. I saw it every time my mother called me for money and called my brother just to hear his voice. I saw it when my brother totaled his second car and my parents replaced it without a single conversation about consequences, while I had spent 3 months saving for my first used Honda at 19. I saw it so clearly and so often that I eventually stopped pointing it out. Pointing it out only made me the problem. Last spring, my brother got engaged. Her name is Clara. She is perfectly pleasant. I have nothing against Clara. What I have something against is what happened in the 4 months between the engagement and the wedding, which was a sequence of events so brazen that I still sometimes sit with it quietly and marvel at the audacity. It started with a phone call from my mother in February. She was excited, warm, the version of herself she deploys when she wants something. She told me the wedding was coming together beautifully, that she and my father were so happy, that family meant everything. Then she paused in the specific way she pauses before the actual subject of the conversation, and she said, "We've been thinking about what you might contribute." I told her I was happy to give a generous gift. She said they were thinking something more substantial, something that would really set the kids up. She had been talking to my father and they both agreed that my house, my 2-acre property outside Austin, would be the most meaningful thing I could offer. I let several seconds pass. I told her I wasn't going to give my brother my house. She said she understood it was a big ask, but that family takes care of family. She said the property was large for one person. She said Kayla wanted to start a family, and that it would mean so much. She said my brother had always looked up to me. I told her no, clearly, and without softening it. I told her I would give a generous cash gift and attend the wedding and be happy for them. I told her my house was not a wedding gift. She sighed in the way that meant the conversation wasn't over, just paused. Over the following 3 months, the ask came back 7 times, in 7 different forms. My father called to tell me it was important to think about legacy. My aunt texted me about the value of sacrifice. My brother called once, voice warm and rehearsed, to tell me he'd always considered me his real parent growing up, which was both manipulative and, in its way, accidentally honest. Each time I said no. Each time the response was some variation of disappointment wrapped in the language of love. I kept showing up anyway. I helped address envelopes. I drove 4 hours to help set up the rehearsal dinner space because my mother asked and I still, even then, had not fully accepted what I was dealing with. I am someone who shows up. That has always been both my greatest quality and the primary thing my family has exploited. The morning of the wedding, I woke up in the hotel room they'd booked, which I had also paid for, and I had a feeling I could not name precisely. Not dread. Something more like clarity that arrives too late to be useful. The ceremony was beautiful. Kayla looked genuinely happy. My brother cried at the altar in a way that seemed real. I sat in the 3rd row and felt something close to hope that the evening would pass without incident. I had said no enough times that I believed, or wanted to believe, it was settled. The reception was at a converted barn outside the city. String lights, white linens, a band that was better than expected. I sat at a table with cousins I liked and ate good food, and thought that maybe I had overcalibrated my worry. Maybe the calls had stopped because they had accepted it. Maybe this was just going to be a wedding. My father stood up to give his toast at 8:45. He is a tall man with a preacher's instinct for pausing at exactly the moment that keeps a room attentive. He thanked Kayla's family. He talked about his son with a pride in his voice. I had heard directed at me exactly once, at my college graduation, briefly, before he pivoted to asking if I could help with my brother's first semester tuition. He talked about the future, and about roots, and about home in the way people talk about those things when they are building toward an announcement. Then he said my name. He said that in honor of this occasion, and in the spirit of family, my sister and he gestured toward me with a smile I will never forget. The smile of someone who has already decided the outcome would be gifting the couple her Austin property as a place to begin their life together. The room made a sound. Not applause, not quite, but the intake of breath that precedes applause. I stood up. I do not remember deciding to stand. I remember being standing. I said, clearly and without raising my voice, that I would not be doing that. I said my house was my house. I said I wished my brother and Kayla every happiness and that I had not agreed to this and would not be agreeing to it. The room went very quiet. My father's smile did not disappear. It shifted into something else, the expression of a man recalibrating in real time while maintaining the performance of composure. He said, still holding the microphone, that we could talk about it later. He said this in a tone designed to make me sound like the disruption. I said there was nothing to talk about later because my answer had been no for 4 months. And then my father walked off the stage. He crossed the reception floor in 15 seconds. I was not afraid. I want to be clear about that. I was not afraid. I was in the National Guard. I had been through things that recalibrate your understanding of what constitutes danger. I was not afraid of my father walking toward me. What I did not anticipate was that he would not stop. He grabbed my arm first. Then, when I pulled back, he hit me. It was a single strike. Open palm, across the side of my face, hard enough that I went sideways into the table and heard something crack near my ear that turned out, later, to be a small fracture in my cheekbone. The room made a different sound this time. I remember the tablecloth in my hand. I remember Kayla's voice somewhere, high and fractured. I remember my cousin Marcus being on his feet. I remember my father standing there with his hands still half raised and the microphone on the floor and the band having stopped playing and the moment hanging over all of us like something that could not be taken back. What I remember most clearly is looking at my mother. She was seated 10 feet away. She was not standing. She was sitting with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes on the tablecloth, and I understood in that moment, with a completeness that required no further evidence, exactly where I stood with her. She had known. She had helped plan it. The announcement was not my father improvising, it was a strategy, and she had been part of it, and when the strategy turned physical, she had chosen the tablecloth. Marcus drove me to the emergency room. My face was swelling by the time we reached the car. I had a bag of ice from the bar and a borrowed jacket and my phone, and in the car on the way to the hospital I called my attorney. Her name is Renata. She has been my attorney since I bought the property. And she is the kind of person who answers her phone on Saturday nights and speaks in the measured tone of someone who has seen worse but is not minimizing yours. I told her what had happened. She asked me 4 specific questions and then told me to let the medical team document everything and not to speak to my family until I had talked to her again. The ER was quiet for a Saturday. The doctor who examined me was calm and thorough. She documented the cheekbone fracture and the soft tissue bruising with the careful language of someone who understood that documentation might matter later. She asked me twice, gently, whether I was safe. I told her I was. I told her it was a family event and I had left. I sat in that hospital room for a while after the doctor finished. Not because I needed to. Because I did not know exactly where to go. The hotel was paid through Sunday. My car was still at the venue. Marcus had stayed with me and was in the waiting room reading something on his phone, and I sat in the paper-backed gown under the fluorescent lights, and I thought about the tablecloth in my mother's hands, and how long I had been performing normalcy around something that was not normal. My phone had 31 messages. I did not read them. Renata called at 11:15. She had already spoken to a colleague who handled criminal matters. She told me the documented assault was straightforward. She told me we had options. She asked me what I wanted to do, and she waited while I answered, which is one of the things I respect most about her. She actually waits. I told her I wanted it handled correctly. What I did not know that night, sitting in the emergency room, was that 6 people at the reception had been recording when my father walked across the floor, 6 separate phones. The venue had 4 security cameras. The strike, the fall, the tablecloth, my mother's stillness, all of it had been captured from multiple angles with the kind of coverage that removes any ambiguity. I also did not know that one of the guests was the adult son of my commanding officer in the Guard, who had attended because he was a college friend of Kayla's older brother. He had called his father from the parking lot of the reception venue while I was still in the ambulance. I found out about that call the following Tuesday, when my commanding officer came to my house. He did not call ahead. He knocked on my door at 7 in the morning in civilian clothes, and when I opened it, he looked at the bruising on my face still visible, yellow-green at the edges, and he said, "I heard. I wanted to see for myself." We sat on my back porch, and he drank coffee, and I told him the full story. Not the abbreviated version I had been giving people. The full version, from the February phone call to the reception floor to the emergency room. He listened the way he listens to everything, completely, without interrupting. When I finished, he set down his cup and he said, "You understand what they did, right? They didn't just assault you, they assaulted an officer." I had not framed it that way. I had been thinking about it in personal terms as a daughter, as a sister, as a person whose family had decided her property and her body were available for redistribution. He was right that there was another frame, one with different weight. He did not tell me what to do. He told me what support was available. He told me the Guard takes care of its people. He told me that if I needed anything from the institutional side, I should ask. I asked. By the following week, Renata had filed the criminal complaint. The assault charge was documented, supported by medical records and 6 independent videos and venue camera footage. My father's attorney called Renata twice in the first 3 days. Both times Renata responded in writing. The civil piece took longer. Renata sent formal notice that any further attempts to claim, encumber, contest, or publicly represent any interest in my property would result in immediate legal action. She sent it to my parents, to my father's attorney, and, at my specific request, to every family member who had participated in the campaign over those 4 months, the aunt with the text about sacrifice, the cousin who had called on behalf of my mother, the family friend who had emailed me in March using words like generosity and legacy. I want to be honest about what that felt like. It did not feel like victory. It felt like loss with paperwork. There is a particular grief that comes from confirming something you already knew, that the people who were supposed to love you without conditions had conditions, that the conditions were financial, and that when you removed the financial availability, they removed the love with such efficiency that you understood it had never been the unconditional kind. My brother called me 3 weeks after the wedding. He was not calling about the assault charge. He was calling because he wanted me to know that I had embarrassed him at his wedding. I let him talk. He went on for a while about how I had made a scene, how Kayla was upset, how the family was fractured now because of my choices. I told him that I had not made a choice at his wedding. I had declined to have a choice made for me. He said that wasn't how the family saw it. I told him I understood that, and that it was okay. That I had spent a long time trying to be seen a particular way by this family, and I was tired. That I wished him and Kayla genuinely well. That I was going to hang up now. He said my name in the voice he uses when he is surprised, the voice underneath the performance, and for a moment I heard the younger version of him, the brother I had driven to soccer practice and defended in school hallways and lent money to, without keeping records because I thought that was what family meant. I told him I loved him and I hung up. My father accepted a plea arrangement 4 months later. Misdemeanor assault, documented, on his record. No jail time, but the record exists. Renata made sure it was structured so that any future contact involving harassment or property could be addressed as a pattern. My mother sent me a card at Christmas. It had a cardinal on it, the kind of card you buy in a pharmacy, and inside she had written that she hoped I was well and that the door was always open. She did not mention the wedding. She did not mention the assault. She did not mention the 4 months of calls or the announcement or the tablecloth. I put the card on my counter and looked at it for 2 days. Then I put it in the recycling. It is spring now. My property looks the way it always looks in spring, which is better than anywhere I have ever been. The oak trees budding, the grass coming back, the morning quiet broken only by birds and the sound of my own coffee brewing. I run 4 miles every morning along the fence line. I built this place from a closing document and a savings account, and 2 years of rice and beans, and I know every corner of it. Last month, Marcus came out for a weekend, and we sat on the back porch the same way my commanding officer and I had sat, and Marcus said, "Do you miss them?" I thought about it honestly. I told him I missed the family I had believed they were. I missed the version of my mother who I thought was underneath the strategic warmth. I missed having a brother I could call without calculating what it would cost me. I missed the idea that I had people, the way other people seem to have people, without conditions attached. But I did not miss the calls at midnight. I did not miss the checks I wrote that were never mentioned again. I did not miss calibrating my presence to be useful enough to be included. I did not miss sitting at tables where my name came up only when someone needed something. Marcus nodded. He is the kind of person who receives an honest answer and doesn't try to fix it. I am grateful for that. I am 31 years old and I live alone on 2 acres outside of Austin that belong entirely to me. My commanding officer checks in occasionally. Renata sends a newsletter I actually read. I have work of dope matters and mornings that are quiet and a fence line I know by heart. The thing nobody tells you about being the dependable one is that when you stop being available, you find out very quickly which connections were about you and which ones were about what you provided. It is a hard thing to find out. It is also, in its way, a clean thing. The oak trees don't care either way. Every spring they come back regardless. I've started to think that's the right model. You root yourself in the right ground, you grow in the right direction, and eventually even the hard seasons just become part of what made the wood strong. I don't need them to understand that. I already do.